Hello, Assalamualaikum. Hey guys, so today we're going to be learning about chapter 1.4 hydrocarbons. So let's get started. Before we begin our adventure in hydrocarbons, let's look at the learning outcome. At the end of this topic, you should be able to define hydrocarbons. Next is classify hydrocarbons into a few categories, which is aliphatic and aromatic, saturated and unsaturated. You should also be able to differentiate between saturated and unsaturated organic compounds. In this video, we will also be including examples for how to differentiate between saturated and unsaturated organic compounds. So let's get started. What are hydrocarbons? Hydrocarbons are basically organic compound that is made out of carbon and hydrogen. Carbon and hydrogen only. Okay, so for example, if you have a carbon, for example, this is an example of a propane. You have a carbon and a hydrogen surrounding the carbon atom that completes the 4 bonds for a carbon. Then you'll have a hydrocarbon. If you have a carbon that's bonded to another, if you have, for example, if I replace H with a chlorine group, then this is not a hydrocarbon. Okay, because the main concept of hydrocarbon is basically if you have a carbon and hydrogen only, and then you can call it as a hydrocarbon compound. So that's the key concept. Organic compound that contains carbon and hydrogen. Hydrocarbons can be classified into 2 main categories. The first one is aliphatic compound. Aliphatic hydrocarbons are basically hydrocarbons that containing carbon and hydrogen joined in a straight chain. So you can have a skeletal, this is a skeletal structure, so you have, this is a straight chain. You can also have it in a branch chain. A branch chain is basically when you have a straight chain and then you have a little bit of branching there. Okay, and then you also have a non-aromatic rings. Non-aromatic rings are basically cyclic compound. Okay, cyclic compound is basically when you have a ring. Okay, you can have it in the shape of a hexagon or a pentagon. Okay, so this is what we call this as a hexane and a pentane. While aromatic hydrocarbons are basically, they have to obey a certain type of rules, which is they have to be cyclic. The first one, they have to be cyclic, and then they have to be conjugated molecules or ion and stabilized by pi electron delocalization. The best example for aromatic compound is basically benzene. Benzene is an example of an aromatic compound. Why? Because the first, it is a cyclic, it's a hexagon shape, which is conjugated. It's a conjugated molecule which is stabilized by 6 pi electrons, with 1 pi electrons having 2 electrons, with 1 pi electron having 2 electrons, so it's a 6 pi electron delocalization. Okay, so you will learn this more further in the following chapter, which is aromatics. Next, aliphatic can be further categorized into 2 categories, which are saturated hydrocarbon and unsaturated hydrocarbon. Saturated hydrocarbon are basically aliphatic hydrocarbons that only contain a single bond around the carbon atom. So you can have a carbon single bonded to a carbon, another carbon, or a carbon single bonded to a hydrogen. The best example is basically any organic compound from the homological series of alkane. Alkane is a good example of a saturated hydrocarbon. Example would be methane. Methane is CH4 and it has 1 carbon surrounded by 4 single bond hydrogen. So this is a saturated hydrocarbon because it has only contains single bond bonded to 4 hydrogen. Okay, it's a single bond only. Alright, so that's a saturated hydrocarbon. Unsaturated hydrocarbon are basically hydrocarbons that at least have one carbon-carbon double bond, one carbon-carbon double bond, or carbon-carbon triple bond. Okay, at least one. If you see an organic compound with one double bond or one alkyne, one triple bond, then it is an unsaturated hydrocarbon. The examples that I will show you are 2-pentene and 1-butene, which they are from the homologous series of alkene. If a double bond, it is an alkene. If it's a triple bond, it's known as alkyne. Okay, so 2-pentene, since pentene you have 5, so you have one carbon, you have one double bond here, so it is a unsaturated hydrocarbon. At least one, if you have one. Okay, hydrocarbon. Alkyne is also known as a unsaturated hydrocarbon because it has contained at least one triple bond. Because alkyne is a triple bond, carbon triple bond to another carbon. So it is known as unsaturated hydrocarbon. Alright. Okay. So that's basically it. Just remember, okay, that if you have that alkene belongs to the saturated hydrocarbon, alkene and alkyne belongs to the unsaturated hydrocarbon. Okay, because the key concept: saturated single bond, unsaturated carbon-carbon double bond, or a carbon-carbon triple bond. That's it for hydrocarbon. Thank you! Hey guys, today we're going to be learning how to differentiate saturated hydrocarbon and unsaturated hydrocarbon. So now I'm going to show you how to differentiate between saturated hydrocarbons and unsaturated hydrocarbons. So we know that saturated hydrocarbons must only contain single bond around the carbon atom. Okay, single bond around the carbon atom. While unsaturated hydrocarbons are basically hydrocarbons that at least have one double bond, carbon-carbon double bond, or carbon-carbon triple bond. Right? So that's the key main difference between saturated hydrocarbons and unsaturated hydrocarbons. So these are the following examples of organic compound. So we have here, if you look at this structure, and you can see that it's all single bond. There's no double bond. So this molecule is known as a saturated hydrocarbon. Okay. Next, we'll move on to this structure here, this molecule structure here, this one. And as you can see, there's carbon and hydrogen. Okay, and then suddenly you have an oxygen double bonded to a carbon. So, remember the main concept of hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are hydrogen and carbons only. An organic compound that's made of carbon and hydrogen. So if you have an oxygen here, that means it is not a hydrocarbon. This is not a hydrocarbon because of the presence of oxygen bonded to a carbon. This is what we call as an aldehyde, which you'll learn in the next following topic. Next, let's look at the structure here, this one. If you can see here, you have one double bond here. Remember, the key concept of unsaturated hydrocarbon, if you have at least one carbon double bond, then it is known as a unsaturated hydrocarbon. Okay. Now next, let's look at the structure here, and as you can see, the structure have a single bond and one carbon-carbon double bond. So if you have at least one, okay, at least one carbon-carbon triple bond, then this is known as an unsaturated hydrocarbon. Okay, for example, if they ask which homologous series they belong to, if a single bond like this saturated hydrocarbon, so this definitely belongs to an alkene, and the double bond belongs to an alkene, and the triple bond belongs to an alkyne. Alright, so this is how you differentiate between saturated hydrocarbons and unsaturated hydrocarbons. Remember the key concept. Alright, thank you, bye!